Prince Philip is admitted to hospital on the advice of his personal doctor. As he travels to London from Norfolk, the Queen goes the other way for her traditional Christmas break, with the palace insisting the Duke's stay is only a precaution.
5 days before Christmas and the Duke of Edinburgh is not with the Queen but back in hospital in central London. At age 98, no medical treatment can be considered routine.
Also tonight, an American diplomat's wife is charged over the death of the British teenage motorcyclist Harry Dunn.
The ayes have it. The ayes have it.
The Prime Minister's Brexit withdrawal bill passes a Commons vote as leaving the EU gets a step closer. And the big rush to get away for Christmas is severely slowed down by extensive flooding.
This is the ITV Evening News with Ranveer Singh.
Good evening. The Duke of Edinburgh is in hospital tonight, undergoing treatment on the advice of his doctor. The 98-year-old was admitted this morning as a precautionary measure for a pre-existing condition, Buckingham Palace said. Prince Philip is set to stay in the King Edward VII Hospital in central London for a few days, and he may miss the royal family's traditional Christmas celebrations in Sandringham. Here's our royal editor Chris Shipp on the Duke's latest health concerns.
The train which pulled into King's Lynn Station this morning was carrying the passenger it was meant to. Whatever concerns the Queen has for her husband's health, they were not enough to cancel her planned departure from London to Norfolk, where she will spend her Christmas break at Sandringham with the rest of her family. Whether or not the Duke of Edinburgh will join them on Christmas Day, no one yet knows. At about the same time as the Queen travelled to Norfolk, Prince Philip was going in the opposite direction. He was driven here to King Edward VII Hospital in central London, not by ambulance but by car, and we are told he walked into the building for his treatment. As for his admission to hospital, Buckingham Palace said in a statement it was for observation and treatment in relation to a pre-existing condition. The admission is a precautionary measure on the advice of His Royal Highness's doctor. The Duke is a man who has always valued his fitness and independence. This was him with Sir David Attenborough earlier this year. And he also attended the wedding of the daughter of the Queen's cousin in May. But at 98 years old, no treatment can be considered routine. And whether he has a repeat of a bladder infection or complications from flu-like symptoms, he will be closely monitored.
Well, I think there's always concern about somebody who's 98 years old. But of all the 98-year-olds that you'll ever see, you'll never find somebody in quite as good shape as Prince Philip. Last time I saw him was in the summer, and he was walking with the gait of a man of 45. I mean, he looked amazing, hand behind his back, absolutely ramrod straight, and, in very good shape.
Prince Philip formally retired in 2017 when he bowed out of royal duties on a rainy day in the forecourt of Buckingham Palace. Since then, he has spent much of his time in Sandringham. It was there he had the crash in January when he collided with a car on a busy road which runs close to his home. Remarkably, he escaped with only superficial injuries. Unless there is a sudden change in the Duke's condition, the Queen will remain at Sandringham and await the doctor's assessment on whether Prince Philip can be released from hospital before Christmas. Chris Shipp, ITV News.
Well, we'll get the latest from Chris, who's still outside the King Edward VII Hospital in a moment. But first, let's cross to Paul Davies, who's in Sandringham, where, of course, the Queen arrived today. And, Paul, still no sign then tonight of the Queen changing any of her Christmas plans?
No, not at all. The Queen arrived here at Sandringham this morning, and although we can be certain that she'll be keeping in touch with her husband's condition, there is a firm plan at the moment for her to remain here for both Christmas and the New Year, and that's being seen as the strongest indication that the Duke of Edinburgh's health is not a cause for immediate alarm, although, as we've been hearing quite often, any treatment is a cause for concern with a 98-year-old. Prince Philip has been living here at Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate since slipping out of public duties and largely out of the public gaze. He left here in a car this morning, bound for London and hospitals. Officials are hoping that in a number of days he may be able to return here to rejoin the Queen and other members of his family for the traditional Christmas gathering.
Paul Davies, thank you. Well, let's pick up on that point that you've made there with Chris, who's outside the hospital tonight, as I say. I mean, do you have any idea really how long the Duke is likely to be there then, Chris?
Well, my understanding is at least for a couple of days, which means he could be back at Sandringham before Christmas. We don't yet know, and they probably don't really know here either, depending on how well he responds to that treatment. Look, those of us who do this job for a long enough period of time know that the royal family don't like to give too much detail about medical conditions, and nor do they give us many updates about what's going on in buildings like this one behind me. But the very fact that they had time to drive him here from Sandringham, and he walked in that building there rather than go to a hospital much closer, suggests that this was no real emergency. We just have to wait and see how long he will be here for. But, you know, at 98, no treatment can be considered routine. But look at this man, the longest-serving consort. This is a year when he turned 98, which started with that car crash in Sandringham, which he remarkably walked away from with barely a scratch. But it ends with him in hospital and undergoing more medical treatment.
Chris Shipp, thank you. The parents of Harry Dunn have told ITV News the charging of an American woman over his death is a huge step forward. Anne Sakoulas was formally accused today of causing death by dangerous driving in a crash which killed the teenage motorcyclist. She fled to the US, claiming diplomatic immunity, and her lawyers say she won't come back. We'll have more on that in a moment. First, though, Neil Connery heard from Harry's parents on why they will never stop fighting for justice.
For Harry Dunn's family, the hugs and tears today were for once ones of relief and pride. They just learned charges were being laid against the American driver accused of causing his death by dangerous driving.
We feel that we've taken a huge step in the start of achieving the promise to Harry that we made.
For Harry's father, the news was also overwhelming.
I can't really say. I'm sorry. I'm just a bit speechless at the minute. I'm still in shock from the meeting, and I'm sorry. It's all right.
Harry Dunn was 19 when he died in August after his motorbike was in a collision with a car owned by the wife of a US intelligence officer. Anne Sakoulas left the UK a few weeks after the crash under diplomatic immunity. Last week, ITV News filmed her in America. She's now been charged and is facing extradition proceedings. Today, Harry's parents told me about the promise they made to him in hospital after his death and what they've gone through.
Roller coaster, I think, is an understatement, isn't it?
But you made that promise, and we were all in that room when they made him presentable for us to see him. And we agreed as a family that night that, you know, even though we didn't ever dream that it was going to end up what's happened.
They say today's news will allow them to start grieving.
Really start to open up and unlock everything that we have literally shut down. And it's going to be a really dark and painful place to go, but we know we have to do it. Yeah. And it's scary.
Christmas is going to be a difficult period, but you face it now with the hope of justice.
I can go and buy a tree.
Feels better.
It sounds a stupid thing to say, doesn't it? Just a simple thing like that, but I can actually go and buy a tree.
But it does feel better. It does, because we know we can go into Christmas now for the rest of the family. Yes, it won't be the same, and yes, there'll be sadness, but at least we know that when the new year comes, the battle starts and we can...
Yeah, we'll come back fighting again.
Their determination that justice will prevail, unshakable as always. Neil Connery, ITV News.
Our correspondent Emma Murphy is in Washington for us. Emma, what has been the reaction there then to Mrs Sakoulas being charged?
Well, it has been an extremely different reaction from that scene in the UK. Anne Sakoulas has not been seen herself, but she did issue a statement via her solicitor where she offered sympathies to Harry Dunn's family once more and went on to say this was an accident and a criminal prosecution with a potential penalty of 14 years imprisonment is simply not a proportionate response. Anne will not return voluntarily to the United Kingdom to face a potential jail sentence for what was a terrible but unintentional accident. Now, we have also had information from the State Department, who would have to deal with any extradition request. They have also issued sympathy to Harry Dunn's family, sympathies from the State Department, from the President and also from the US Ambassador to the UK. But they seem to be quite clear that Anne Sakoulas will not be returning to the UK anytime soon, if at all. In one of their statements, they described the situation as an egregious abuse, saying that she had diplomatic immunity and it would be potentially troubling for there to be any change in that situation. I think it's very clear that they will be supporting their US citizen and trying to avoid any opportunity for her to be returned to the UK for any form of trial.
OK, Emma Murphy, thank you. Brexit moved a big step closer today as MPs comfortably backed Boris Johnson's deal. After months of deadlock and division, it passed the next stage in the Commons with a majority of 124 votes. The Prime Minister said it's time for the nation to act together. But Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn ordered his MPs to vote against it, saying it would rip communities apart and sell out public services. From Westminster, here's our political correspondent, Carl Dinnan.
This was the moment for which Boris Johnson had fought the election. He won that and he won this. For excited new MPs, it was the first time they'd ever voted in the Commons.
We're going to get Brexit done. This is our first stage and we're going to, it's really great that this is our first vote as well.
And it will be one of the most important votes they ever cast.
The ayes to the right, 358. The noes to the left, 234.
The withdrawal agreement bill passed its second reading comfortably. It's not law yet, but it surely will be, and the Prime Minister is already looking beyond the Brexit debate.
This is the time when we move on and discard the old labels of leave and remain. In fact, the very words seem tired to me.
But this bill lacked concessions to Labour contained in the October version, notably protections for refugee children campaigned for by Lord Dubs.
These are vulnerable children in danger of trafficking, criminality, prostitution and so on. What are they to do to join their family? The only choice we leave them is to go on a ferry, a dinghy across the channel or on the back of a lorry. I mean, that's not the way to treat young people.
And it sparked anger in the House.
Can the Prime Minister tell me why he is making this mean-spirited and nasty move?
Yeah. We remain proud of our work in receiving unaccompanied children. Will continue to support fully the purpose and spirit of the Dubs Amendment, but this is not the place in this bill to do so.
A number of other features have also been removed from the original bill. Ministers can no longer extend the transition period, during which the relationship with the EU stays the same beyond the end of next year. A clause giving MPs oversight of the government's negotiating position has also gone, and a section on the protection of workers' rights has been removed, to Labour's dismay.
Labour will not support this bill, as we remain certain there is a better and fairer way for this country to leave the European Union.
But more than 30 Labour MPs defied his orders to vote against the bill.
The sun is metaphorically shining.
Not that the jubilant Conservatives and their supporters outside even needed the help.
I've just come to thank people, but thank you so much.
And before MPs had bought their last-minute presents and packed up for Christmas, they also voted through the government's timetable for the completion of the Brexit legislation.
Well, Carl is there now. What a way to end this year in politics.
And what a year it's been. It was only 12 months ago that Prime Minister Theresa May was gearing up for her first meaningful vote here. That, of course, went down to the biggest defeat of a government in history. Since then, there have been 3 more attempts to get the deal through, 3 deadlines missed, and, of course, a change of Prime Minister. And all the time, this place, Parliament, defying
binding the hands of government in unprecedented ways. But what today shows is that that is now over. The Parliament that has been returned by the electorate now supports the government. But that doesn't mean that the Brexit drama is entirely over, because now the government has set itself such a tight deadline for agreeing the next part of the Brexit deal, the future relationship with the EU, that many people doubt it can be done in time.
Carl Dinnan, thank you. 2 services have been held to celebrate the lives of Saskia Jones and Jack Merritt, who were killed in last month's London Bridge terror attack. Friends and family of 23-year-old Saskia Jones attended a memorial in her hometown of Stratford-upon-Avon after a private funeral earlier in the day. The funeral of 25-year-old Jack Merritt took place in Cambridge. Both families paid tribute, saying they had dedicated their lives to helping others. Australia's Prime Minister has apologised for going on holiday to Hawaii with his family as his country burns. Scott Morrison says he's now returning home after growing anger at his absence. 2 firefighters have died battling the bushfires as the country swelters under a record-breaking heatwave. Martha Fairley has more.
With more than 100 wildfires raging across New South Wales, a 7-day state of emergency has been declared. And Australia's most populous state is now mourning the loss of 2 volunteer firefighters as they responded to the fires. Geoffrey Keaton and Andrew O'Dwyer were killed when a tree fell on their truck. Another 3 were injured. But shock has turned to anger. On the streets of Sydney, an environmental protester dressed as the Prime Minister Scott Morrison is led away by police. And now there's added fury after it was revealed the real Prime Minister's been on holiday with his family in Hawaii while the wildfires burn. He's been forced to cut short his trip and apologise in a radio interview.
They'll be pleased I'm coming back, I'm sure, but they know that, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in the control room. No. That's the brave people who do that are doing that job, but I know that Australians would want me back at this time after these fatalities, and so I'll happily come back and do that.
The Prime Minister is expected to return to Australia this weekend, just as another warning of catastrophic bushfire danger is issued for Saturday. Almost 1,000 homes have been burned down in the past 6 weeks, and with record temperatures twice this week, there's little anyone can do to stop the flames.
Yesterday was hell.
Just a huge wall of flames just came. I had to hide behind the corner as it was coming, and I just sort of had the hose on me, and I stood up and it was still intensely hot. I sort of burnt my arm, and I just bolted up to where the fire trucks were. I couldn't do anything, everything was already alight.
And while authorities in New South Wales are warning people not to travel until after this weekend, residents living in the path of the wildfires are being forced to move out of their homes just before Christmas. Martha Fairley, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News, flooding slows up the Christmas getaway for millions of motorists in southern England. And
I love sausage rolls, to put another one in the oven, baby.
Is this year's chart topper a worthy winner of the coveted Christmas #1?
I quite like being a novelty, a sausage roll novelty.
We don't take it too seriously.
First, the new Bank of England governor was unveiled today. Andrew Bailey is not a name you may recognise, but as former chief cashier, you may have seen his signature on some banknotes. And with Brexit fast approaching, you're going to hear a lot more about him. Well, our economics editor Joel Hills is here to fill us in on this. Who is this man?
Well, good question. Well, look, the job he's just taken comes with enormous power and prominence. Responsibilities include keeping prices low and stable, sustaining economic growth and jobs, and protecting the banking system, ensuring it doesn't fall into the arms of the taxpayer like it did 10 years ago. Now, Andrew Bailey's not a household name, but he is hugely experienced, Van Veer, and I think we can see here that he worked at the Bank of England for 30 years, rising to the role of Deputy Governor in 2013. 3 years ago, he left to join the Financial Conduct Authority, and his chances, Van Veer, of becoming incoming governor were assumed to have been damaged by a series of recent financial scandals. Bailey was criticised for sitting on and refusing to publish the investigation into Royal Bank of Scotland and the way it mistreated its small business customers. And then the FCA was criticised more recently for failing to protect consumers from the recent collapse of the Woodford Investment Fund. But the government this morning is insisting that Andrew Bailey is the right man for the job.
Without question, he's the right person to lead the bank as we forge a new future outside the EU and level up across our great country. Andrew brings unparalleled experience of central banking and can draw on 30 years of experience. And some will obviously be asking, was there a chance to give this job to a woman?
There's a lot of pressure on the bank to do exactly that, on the government to do exactly that. We've had two female prime ministers. The Bank of England, in its 325 years, has not managed a single female candidate, female governor. There were strong candidates. In fact, it was widely reported that actually Manoush Shafiq, who you can see there, was lined up for the job. Now, the Financial Times claims the government had a problem with their views on Brexit. The government denies it was a consideration, but Brexit will be Andrew Bailey's most pressing challenge when he joins the bank in March.
OK. Joel, thank you. A new spacecraft hoping to taxi astronauts to and from the International Space Station has hit problems during its test run. Officials say Boeing's Starliner burnt too much fuel too quickly, causing it to go off course minutes after blastoff. It will return to Earth now for further testing. The head of a Merseyside drugs gang who was filmed throwing piles of cash around in Monaco has been jailed for 26 years. Liam Cornett led a UK-wide network which exploited vulnerable people. And Arsenal have appointed Mikel Arteta as its new head coach. The former Arsenal captain has left Manchester City to take over at the Emirates. He said it was a huge honour to be rejoining the club. Now, there was a frustrating and miserable start to the Christmas getaway for many travellers in south-east England this morning. Heavy rain flooded the M23 motorway near Gatwick Airport, forcing its closure in both directions. And as Dan Rivers reports, the travel chaos was compounded by severe disruption on the trains.
This is what happens when you have one of the wettest autumns on record, combined with a month's worth of rain in a week. It meant getting anywhere around Gatwick today was extremely challenging. This was the M23, the main road to and from the airport, closed for several hours because of flooding as the Christmas getaway ground to a complete standstill. It wasn't much better on the trains either. A landslip closing the line near Guildford, and in other places the floodwaters had eroded the ballast under the track, leading to cancellations and delays.
It's made me probably about 2 hours late for work, which is not great at all, considering it's a Friday and it's nearly Christmas.
Waiting for the buses, no idea what time they're coming, no information. Just all in all, a bad day, and last day at work, so not great.
And there was misery too for those trying to run a business around Gatwick today.
Complete devastation, to be honest. Pulled up in the car park, it was just a lake, physically nowhere, you know, that you could escape the water. The road out the front, absolutely horrendous. You know, the water's actually gone out onto the road. You've got cars coming past, it's just absolutely horrendous.
On the eve of the big Christmas getaway, the countryside around Gatwick is absolutely saturated. Here the River Mole has burst its banks and more rain is on its way. With a further 30 millimetres of rain forecast tomorrow in parts of the south, driving home for Christmas this weekend is not going to be easy. Dan Rivers, ITV News, Gatwick Airport.
And finally tonight, the race to be #1 at Christmas has in the past produced classics from legendary acts like Slade, Band-Aid, Boney M and Sir Cliff Richard, of course. But this year, for the second time in a row, we've got YouTube prankster Lab Baby with another song about sausages. So is this an unsavoury end for the tradition of Christmas hits? Nick Wallace reports.
This is what a proper Christmas #1 should sound like. Baby, if you got to go away. Classic videos, belting songs that will last through the ages. And there won't be snow in Africa this Christmas time. But this? I Love Sausage Rolls is the second novelty Christmas #1 by the same artist about the same subject for the same charity, the Trussell Trust. And it's already sold more downloads than its predecessor.
I quite like being a novelty, a sausage roll novelty. And we've now done something that only the Spice Girls and the Beatles have done. We're this weird combination of all of them, and that's amazing, isn't it?
We're a monster, basically.
I Love Sausage Rolls is by no means the first novelty Christmas #1, and by no means the worst. 1993 was a shocker. What happened to genuine talent? And all those reality TV stars?
10 years ago, we were sitting here thinking, well, is there ever going to be a Christmas #1 that isn't an X Factor record? You've seen charity records, you've seen, current hits get to #1. This year we've got a real novelty record, which happens to be a charity record as well. Maybe we're going to see a few more novelties over the next few years.
So what message did the reigning king and queen of the charts have for the other artists they beat to the top?
I tweeted Capaldi saying, would he like to share a foot-long sausage roll with me? And he replied, only if we could do it Lady in the Tramp style. So that has to happen. Lewis Capaldi, I keep telling every interview, he needs to ring me. We need to make this happen.
Don't be surprised if they're back next year. Nick Wallace, ITV News.
Certainly makes you smile. Right, that's all for now. Julie Etchingham will be here at the slightly later time of 10:30. But from me and everybody here, have a great evening. Bye-bye.